David, what's the mood like? Some people suggesting it's a bit lacklustre, perhaps not as well attended as it could have been?
Oh, I'm not sure about that. I mean, the thing that matters at these party conferences is partly the tenor, and there's been lots and lots of argument, of course, but what's most important will be the leader's speech at the end, because at the moment, Rishi's done half the job. He's taken hold of the government. He's given a sense of grip and competence and so on. But what he hasn't done is express the vision for the future in terms that people understand it themselves. You know, whether I can buy a house, whether I've got enough money to get by, whether my pension's going to work, all those sorts of things. He needs to do that. Ben Houchen said it last night. I think he was right. I think also Rishi's aware of it. So I think we're looking forward to a really important speech at the end of the conference.
Let's focus on today quickly, if we can. Lizz Truss, the former PM, gives a speech at about lunchtime. The Chancellor gives his speech moments after that. We're expecting Lizz Truss to outline the case for tax cuts, big tax cuts now, whereas the Chancellor said with Kay Burley earlier, perhaps there could be a small tax cut at some point next year, but nothing immediate. Where do you stand on that debate?
Well, first thing I'll say with respect to Liz is, you know, we've had the experiment in trying Liz's policy last year. And what you don't want is a big tax cut followed by a drop in the pound, followed by a massive increase in the cost of living, which is what would happen if you had too big a tax cut, which wasn't thought through carefully. Now, with respect to whether or not they can afford one now, I think actually I am with those who believe that a moderate tax cut, a modest tax cut, is possible this year. Why do I say that? Well, they're being very cautious in terms of deficits of borrowing and so on. Look at what's happened to the forecasts that the Bank of England, the OBR, the Treasury have put up in the last year. They've all been pessimistic. We had a reassessment of the size of the economy only a couple of months ago. So they're being too pessimistic. And I think that's probably what's being said to the Chancellor and the Prime Minister. And if I were them, I'd aim off a bit and say, actually, we can probably afford a bit more than the Bank and the Treasury and the OBR are telling us. That's where I'd be. Not a huge tax cut, not a massive sort of tidal wave tax cut, the sort of thing I suspect that Liz will be talking about later, but a carefully thought through modest tax cut's going to have big impact. I mean, I would do something like do away with IR35 or maybe a partial inheritance tax removal, not a complete abolition, or maybe a change in income tax. One of those sorts of things which will have direct effect on the ordinary person and actually have a beneficial economic effect. But,
well,
you know, it's
I wasn't going to
huge.
bring up inheritance tax, to be honest, but you can't argue that cutting inheritance tax will help ordinary people. It just simply won't. Surely if there's only a little bit of room for a little bit of a tax cut, that's got to be last on the list.
Well, forgive me, but the simple truth is that the story of all taxes is they start out as taxes on the rich and they gradually become taxes on the middle class and then the poor and so on. And the truth of the matter is today, although only about 5% of people pay inheritance tax, historically, I would think more like 50% of the country, because of house price inflation and other things like that, are worrying about it for the future. And it's the worry element of tax as much as the cash element of tax that matters. But as I said, it would be small. It wouldn't be enormous, you know, and it wouldn't be my first in batting order. But it's the sort of thing that you might run with to demonstrate what the direction of the country is. What the trouble is in the last 4 or 5 years, partly because of COVID, really, the historic tendency of the Conservative Party to try to keep taxes down has been overwhelmed by events. And we need to show indications that that's going to turn around a little bit and go in a different direction.
It's not top of your batting order. Where is it relative to an income tax, changing the bands around that, business rates, corporate taxes, all of which will have a much more immediate impact on the economy?
Well, I don't think interest rates need to go up any more at all. I think they've done their job, and I think that the trend now will be downwards on interest rates, or ought to be, largely because it has a direct impact on people's ability to spend, on their mortgages and so on. And I think if we want to increase growth, part of that's about increasing consumer optimism, and that's a direct impact there. My favourite, if you like, would be something to help small businesses. I mean, I would abolish IR35. We won't go into the detail of the bureaucracy, but it's a very, very wearing and difficult tax that represses activity, represses enterprise. I would abolish it and get very little take. It will cost next to nothing for the Treasury to do that. And I'd look at a small change in the basic rate of income tax. Because I just think that those are the things that have direct impact and will actually feed into growth. They won't pay for themselves entirely. I mean, IR35 is so small it doesn't matter, but they will have a big impact on optimism and on enterprise and on determination and ambition, if you like. Those are the sorts of things you need to do to make the economy grow.
Finally, wanted to touch on HS2, but not the issue at hand, but rather your party bosses, your government's communications around it. And once there was a leak, hypothetical or otherwise, a week or two ago, about what the government might be doing, do you think that the government should have come out and decided and announced what it was deciding to do on this topic loud and clear before getting to Manchester, a city very much at the centre of the debate, and having all these hypotheticals, taking up every interview for half of what's being discussed with no answers given? Do you think they made a communications error?
Well, look, I mean, turn that on its head. One of the problems with HS2, and we go back to Blair and Brown and Cameron and May and Johnson, all of them seem to make the decisions on the basis of the headline. You know, where is it we're going? Oh, we're investing for the future, without thinking through the details. I mean, I'm not an HS2 fan simply because, and I'm a Northern MP, remember, simply because I thought there were better ways to spend the money, and it was always going to be 3 or 4 times overrun, which is now what we've discovered. It's much better to get the decision right. And actually, that's characteristic of Rishi Sunak. He wants to get the decision right. Now, as to how this came about, whether it was a leak from Number 10 or whatever, and all those things, that's I won't say above my pay grade, just beyond my pay grade. But what's important is to get the decision right. And bear in mind, it's got a decision with knock-on effects. So you might, for example, not be too keen on carrying on with the Birmingham to Manchester extension, but equally important to Manchester and all the other northern cities is the east-west train links. And they're much more cost-effective, they're faster, and they're more clear in their impact. All the way from Liverpool to Hull, we could do with improving the train lines there. And probably much more effective than HS2. So it's getting it right that matters. It's going through all of the cost details, all the planning details and the alternatives, and then making the right decision. And that, frankly, is what the public expect. I mean, you know, you don't imagine the North is full of people who are waiting on HS2. What they're doing is waiting on the next train to Leeds. And that's not quite the same problem. And they actually expect a decision which treats them like intelligent people, which is what they are, and says, look, this is the best way we can spend money for your advantage. We do that, then it won't. This will all be forgotten. This last few days of arguing about it will be forgotten.